Good afternoon, and welcome to the Columbus Metropolitan Club. I'm Stephen White, Chief Strategy Officer for COSI and a proud member here at CMC and its Board of Trustees. Welcome to the Carol A. McGuire Legacy and Civic Engagement Forum, celebrating arts and culture. We are so pleased you are all with us here today. Now, today's forum is made possible by the Carol A. McGuire Legacy and Civic Engagement Fund, which celebrates the contributions made to society by arts and culture. We are sorry that Carol was not able to join us today, but let's give Carol a round of applause. And Carol, if you're watching by live stream, thank you so very much. Now, we would also like to thank today's forum sponsor, AECOM, and the Center for Human Kindness at the Columbus Foundation and the Columbus Dispatch for presenting today's live stream. Let's thank all of these supporters today for their generous support. Nannette Maciejunes has steered the Columbus Museum of Art through 2 decades of growth as its leader, and safely brought the crown jewel of the Columbus art scene through the pandemic. As Nannette retires at the end of the year, she leaves CMA and our city enriched by art and its artists. Today, our panel reflects on Nannette's legacy and shares their thoughts on the role of art in society, on Columbus's amazing art scene, and what's next for art in this great city of Columbus. Please welcome today's very distinguished speakers, Nannette Maciejunes, Executive Director and CEO of the Columbus Museum of Art. Bryan Moss, painter and comic artist. And our host, Tom Katzenmeyer, President and CEO of the Greater Columbus Arts Council. You can learn today. You can learn more about today's speaker in your forum flyer. And Tom, I'm going to turn the conversation over to you today. Thanks.
Thank you, Stephen. It's great to see everybody. We have a lot of our friends here today, Bryan and Nannette. Oh, yeah.
I cried out for the arts.
Everybody get some coffee, relax. I got some Starbucks up here. We're going to have a little conversation. So Nannette and I have known each other for 30 years, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
I've had 3 jobs during that time. You've had the 1 job. But that's been good.
Very venturesome.
Yes, and most of our relationship has been around money. And
Yes.
we'll talk about that too.
I still think that award that I'm getting tomorrow should have money.
Right.
Yeah.
But honestly, it's such an honor for me to host this conversation with these 2 folks. So Nannette has like an unbelievable track record in this city and really has taken the museum to new heights. Bryan is just so much fun. You can tell he's the artist on the panel, can't you? Yeah. He is an illustrator, a painter, he's a muralist, he's a comic creator, he's a graphic novelist. He's been part of our marketing campaign. He just took down an exhibit, his first exhibit at the Art Museum called About Time, The Art of Bryan Moss. Yes, About Time, yes. And he's going to Japan in a couple weeks, so we're going to talk about that too and what he's going to be doing there. But Nannette, I'm like not worthy to be on the same stage as you.
He's taking notes. I feel like I'm just like a notes.
Yes, I have notes up here. So here's
Bryan
the first
was
thing
just
we
a
got to get
kid.
out of the way. So Nannette, like you're retiring? Like seriously? Is this like really happening?
Yes, it is really happening.
Honestly, like I get weepy when I think about that. I don't know what I'll do. It's like you're leaving me behind. You know,
Oh, no.
it's like,
I'll still call and complain about money to you. Don't worry about
okay.
it.
As long as that can continue.
You won't call me back, of course,
right.
but I will still call and complain.
Right. The thing about this is you are not a retiring kind of person. I mean,
Yeah,
I don't
no.
see you going home to your knitting. I mean, there's just like no way. You're so energetic. And
Yeah, my family's a little worried.
yeah, they should be worried
They
about
are.
this. And
My husband has
yeah.
been retired for a while. And I said, he keeps saying, what are you going to do? And I said, I don't know. And I said, you did this successfully. And he said, yeah, but I wasn't a workaholic. So I think there is some concern at my family that I will not take up knitting. Yeah.
Well, Bryan and I will have ideas for you. Won't we?
Oh, yeah. There's a lot of work in the community still, so,
Yeah.
we'll bring you back out.
You said in the dispatch that you kind of just want to get out of the way of the new director, whoever that might be.
Well, I think that's really important. I think it's important that the museum family and the whole community bond with the new leader, because it's really important that I had my time of, taking care of the museum and, stewarding it, and now it's someone else's chance to take it on a great journey, and I want to make sure that happens.
Bryan, I want to start by talking to you about your relationship with the museum over the years. Started as a kid, as a child.
As a wee young lad, born 1981, south side of Columbus. No, so my father used to work at the Columbus Museum of Art when I was a child. And so this would have been, I think around 1990, 89, I started going to the museum. And so it was kind of like just part of my DNA. And then when I turned 18, I was going to go to CCAD. And then I realized how expensive it was. And so I was like, well, I'll just go learn how to do art from working at the art museum. So then that's when I got hired in like 2000 and 2001, somewhere around there. And I think I was there till 2018, I'm not sure, something like that. Yeah, maybe a little bit before that. So yeah, it's one of those things where I literally grew up there. So the funny story, my father was a security guard, so I started in security as well. And some of the older guards still had schedules with my father's name on it. He passed away by that time. So it's really cool to see how that comes full circle, So, and now I'm here on the stage telling everybody the story. So, yeah, so it's pretty cool.
So when you were a kid, did you ever, since you had access to the museum and your dad was a guard, did you, ever get in any trouble there?
No, I was cute when I was a kid.
Yeah.
So I would just smile and show my dimples, and then everyone would give me candy and stuff like that. So it was more me going there to get money from my dad and to get candy from the guards. So I'd make my rounds, So, but no, but in all sincerity, there was, I think mainly what I took away at that time, because I was small, I'm like a kid, 9, 10, and the art was so big, like a painting that was 3 by 4 feet, you're looking up at it, and you're like, how can someone paint that? And that's kind of where that switch, turned over, where I was like, oh, okay, I can do this, or figure this out, something like that. So yeah, that's the main thing that I took away as a kid from the museum, besides, all the good memories. So yeah.
Nannette, this is clearly one of the hallmarks of your legacy, bringing local artists into the museum, notably artists of color. And I'd like you to comment on that.
Well, I always talk about the fact that I was very blessed when I was still a curator. I met an artist named Roman Johnson, Roman's been gone a long time now, but Roman was a seasoned artist in our community who had also worked for Columbus Public Schools. And we had this idea to do an exhibition on Emerson Burkhardt and Roman Johnson, because Emerson Burkhardt had been a mentor to Roman Johnson. And so Roman was there to help me because Emerson was long gone. And we formed an incredible friendship. And, we're all responsible for our own education. And learning the world. But you can be very blessed by having people in your life who take the time to help you. And Roman Johnson was someone who really changed my worldview, just in the kindest way. This was not his responsibility, it's my responsibility, but he took the time to care about a very stupid, young, white, straight girl and to help her see the world in different ways. And I am endlessly blessed by that. And of course, I never knew the museum without Amina Robinson. I actually never knew Elijah Pierce. I met Mr. Pierce like twice, but Amina, I never knew the museum without Amina, because Amina started coming to the museum when she was a teenager. So that foundation then has just grown to so many of the artists that are in this room with us right now, including Bryan, that the museum needs to be a home for the artists in our community and for all of us. So I think I was just really lucky with Roman to know Roman Johnson.
Can I add on to that, Tom?
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
So I like to insert, from my perspective, there was a lot that Nannette did for impacting the community. One of those is putting employees in the right position. So we have a Hannah, who can be utilized and do great things. Also with the collection, this goes back to the Schiller collection, if you recall. A lot of that work, I think it came out of Chicago.
Yeah, they were collectors out of Chicago.
And a lot of it was a lot of African-American artwork. And not just that, but Nannette, the curators, they put on display. And a lot of that work is challenging, right? So that's when I started seeing those marks, those changes. They were really small. Also, the impact of the Kehinde Wiley show. They purchased one of the paintings from the exhibition. And that guy comes in every weekend with his family or his girlfriend or something to show this painting, and he's from the Near East Side, so you actually see the impact in action while you're there. So it's very visceral, it's very exciting, and it's very appreciated. So yeah.
No, I think the transformation of the collection has been something I've been really proud of. We've grown it, and it's changed so much. I mean, it really has, and the Schiller collection was part of that. The Schiller collection, it was our first, Jacob Lawrence, our first Romare Beardens come from that collection. And that collection also included, we took all the prints. There were some 200 and some prints in this collection. And it also had an extremely strong Jewish voice. And women, because so many women were printmakers. They couldn't make it, they couldn't, get the foundational piece to be able to sustain as a painter, so they became printmakers. So this is and it's work from the 30s through the 50s and 60s. No, there's things all the way up into the 70s. I take that back.
Trickles into the 70s,
yeah, but it's an incredible collection. So watching the collection change over time has been really phenomenal, and it's been an intentional effort on the museums.
I want to go back and talk a little bit more about people from the past that are no longer with us, that influenced us. Certainly, Steve McGuire was on that list. Bill Connor was on that list. Sherry Mitchell was on that list. But I want to talk further about Amina and Denny Griffith. And I was telling Jane at lunch today that my favorite Metropolitan Club was April 8th, 2015, when Denny interviewed Amina here, and it might have been at the Athletic Club. Amina passed away 6 or 7 weeks after that, and Denny passed away 7 or 8 months after that. So I want you both to talk about them, because Nannette, you especially knew them both very well. It's very telling to me that when Amina passed away, she gave her entire estate to the Art Museum, including the work and the house.
And Baby, the last dog.
And the dog.
I didn't find a home for Baby.
Also now, I believe, of blessed memory.
Yes,
yes, okay.
Baby has left us.
The dog is no longer with us, but that says a lot that Amina entrusted her entire life's work with you. So let's talk about Amina. And then Bryan actually got to stay at her home for a period of time, and we want to hear about that.
Totally. You want to start, Nannette?
Yeah, so Amina told me she was going to do this. She'd always told me she was going to do this, and I first of all, I thought, I'll never be director, because Amina's going to live forever, so I don't have to worry about this. But in fact, I was director when she passed, and she believed in the museum, and she believed in it since the time she was quite young. And when she said that she was going to leave her estate and trust the museum, it's such an incredible responsibility for the museum to be able to do that, to really what does that mean? I mean, it's her legacy of her as an artist, her legacy in the community, her broader legacy in the country and in the world. How do we address that? And we put together, some of you may know this, but in case you don't know, we put together a community committee that was led by Barbara Nicholson and Betty Stoll. My brain went, that's why I'm retiring, because Betty, who I've known for 40 years, I couldn't remember her like that. So Betty and Barbara did that. And we had a few trustees on it, but we had different members of the committee. Were you on it? Mm-hmm. I think you were on it. You know, the first sort of thing is like, well, let's make a little museum. And after having lost, even though we tried as a community to save Mr. Pierce's barbershop, we weren't able to do that. The thought of losing Amina's home and studio, I think, would have just crushed many of us. So the immediate idea is, well, let's do a little museum. Sustaining little museums is very difficult. Sustaining any kind of museums is difficult. And after a lot of work, and I think really Barbara and Betty led the way on this, the idea of what other kind of, contribution can it make to the community, which is how we came up with doing the Amina Robinson Fellowships, where artists stay at the house. We have a national fellow that comes and stays at the house and works in the studio. But then this year we introduced a writer's fellow, because Amina was so gifted as a writer as well as a visual artist. So we have that. And then with GCAC, we do these wonderful local fellows. So if you're going to have the house occupied by a national fellow during certain times of the year, what about the rest of the time? And the idea of having local artists working in Amina's space is just brilliant. And so we do that with GCAC. And I think that this, she's not appeared at the bottom of my bed to tell me that I am doing the wrong thing, so I'm feeling we're on the right track here. So I think she would be proud of all of us. So that the house and the studio have a life. And one of the things, again, it takes a whole community to do this. It takes GCAC, it takes the artists, it takes the Columbus Foundation, who was, during their recent anniversary, funded the renovation of the house. So it's been just an incredible journey, and it's just beginning. That's what's really cool.
And we are about to announce today or tomorrow, per Allison Barrett, who the next Amina Robinson Fellow is.
Yeah. So
would you like to say who that is right now?
No.
Okay.
I know
okay.
Allison.
Okay. Because I know who it is. Okay.
You can, but Allison might come up here and smack me.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, watch our website.
Unless Allison wants you to.
Right. I'm more afraid of her than you are.
Yeah. So
Bryan, what was it like being in her house?
So Bryan, you should say, so before the fellowship started, because of COVID and COVID intervenes, and the house was empty, and that just didn't seem right. And we talked to Bryan about, would he live there for a while, use the studio, and be sort of the artist in residence. You may be the only pure artist in residence we ever have, but you were the artist in residence.
Yeah, it was an honor, because it's like I felt like I got to initiate Chris in the space, like my little moment. But I would like to back up a little bit, because Amina was my mentor, one of many mentors. And the key to Amina and a lot of the successful artists out of Columbus, George Bellows, these kind of artists, is that they don't leave, which is really critical. So just imagine for a moment if Amina moved, right? That house wouldn't exist. Residency wouldn't exist, all of that. And the reason I want to take the moment to honor her for that is because, and we know Amina as this goddess, right? This artist extraordinaire. But there's times where their struggle is hard. She's doing it since, 60s, 70s, easily, full in the game. So it's one of those things where that kind of struggle is actually really difficult to sustain. And to see that we have the house now and that we can have a residency is really critical to understand that it's just something as simple as not moving, right? So that being said, my time there was actually, I would say it's magical, because I came out with a graphic novel called Eightfold Path. And guess where that was made? It was made in the house. So, and then when my exhibition went up, the book came out the same day. So I couldn't be more humbled or honored to have that experience and everything line up the way it did. So, I mean, the proof is kind of like in the work at this point, right? So, yeah. So that was it. And it was amazing. So, yeah.
Did you feel her presence there?
Oh, yeah, totally. I can sincerely say the house is haunted in a positive way with her spirit. And it's very comforting. The cool thing about it is when you're in the house, because, it's by that Amazon warehouse. They built that stupid warehouse down the road. So you get these trucks, like they come out like a fleet of army trucks or something, like they're going to war every morning. I had no clue. I didn't even know it was there until I walked and drove down the street, because I was because when you're inside the house, you're so isolated. It's like a cocoon. So it's like she's holding you all the time, Yeah. So yeah, the immersion was incredible there. So yeah, it was great, Tom.
And Tom, I think none of us said this, which I love when Columbus is out in front and leading the way. And this, the National Fellowship and the Visual Arts Festival is really, I believe, we searched, we couldn't find another one yet. We are at least one of the very first, if not the first, National Fellowship for African American Artists.
Yeah.
That is a residency in an artist space. So we're really proud of that, and Columbus should be proud of that. And so,
It's good.
and then of course there's all the work to be done with her actual work to get it out. Even, we want the whole world to discover Amina Robinson, and the exhibition that we did, the big retrospective after the first one that we've done, there'll be many more, I know, after she left us, was incredibly meaningful for so many people.
Can I tell a funny story about when I was working for the collection? Just because we all know that Amina made tons and tons of work, right? But to give you just a fraction of how much work, Carol and I were in her office and we're pulling out a box, and then Carol's like, "Okay, let's go archive this box," right? Inside of it's multiple little boxes. And then I open the first box, and we're at the museum at this point, doing the photography and everything. I opened the box, and rolled up is 100 drawings and letters just in this small box. So you can imagine how long it takes to archive the Amina Robinson collection. And it's a great thing, because then you start reading, but it's oh my gosh, she never stopped working. It's so beautiful.
No, I was going to say that someone said, "Well, why did it take you so long to clean the house out?" And I said,
You
well,
have no clue.
I said, at my house, a stack of stuff is just a stack of stuff. At Amina's house, it could have a stack of books, or could have meaning, real meaning. You have to go through
totally.
everything slowly.
Yeah.
She would annotate books. Over at the Pizzuti Collection, we're starting an Amina Robinson archive and library over there, so people can have access to all of her books and archival material.
I want to talk about how art moves around, because I find this fascinating. So there's a current Edward Hopper retrospective at the Whitney in New York. You know who Edward Hopper is, Nighthawks at the Diner. Everybody knows that painting. But there's a painting from the Columbus Museum of Art that the Columbus Museum of Art owns called Morning Sun, that the Whitney is using as the promotional photograph for the exhibition, and in New York Times advertises. So how does this happen, Nannette? How do they get a painting of yours? And is it just relationships?
Well, it is.
And what's the story on that? Why do you own that Edward Hopper?
Well, let's see. Let's start with why we own the Edward Hopper. So people often ask me, because we all have different tastes, and people will say, "I don't really like contemporary art. The museum should not be spending money on that. How do you know that art is going to be any good?" I get that question a lot. Well, let me tell you, we could not afford that Edward Hopper today, my friends. We bought the Edward Hopper. The Edward Hopper was painted in 1952. We acquired it. We purchased it in 1954. We bought it as a contemporary living artist's work. And yeah, every work of art that may still be wonderful, maybe that artist doesn't become famous, doesn't mean it's not a great work of art, but that is something, I must tell you that the museum seems to have been buying not very good 18th century English art when we should have been buying abstract expressionism. If we just bought one major abstract expressionist picture, but we did not. We were buying English 18th century painting. We do have a beautiful small picture by Jackson Pollock that we were given from the Arthur family, and I'm very grateful for it. But there's a reason to spend some of your time cultivating collectors and also acquiring work in the moment. People think how great the Howd collection is, which is our early modern European and American collection. And he acquired that when it was contemporary art. I mean, most of it's contemporary art for him, and we acquired it soon after. So there's a reason to support the energy of living artists. So that's why we have the Hopper.
Okay.
So, exhibitions.
So do they know, the Whitney knows where that painting is?
Yes, now,
They're
but there
putting
isn't
together
a
next-
giant, you'd think there would be like a giant database.
Yeah.
Somebody in here is a tech person. If you figure out how to do a truly giant database where you can find all of the art, that would be a really cool thing. Would probably make you a lot of money. Yes, it's such a well-published picture. In fact, for many years, it's been the most borrowed picture in the collection. And we have actually had to kind of slow it down a little bit and keep it home a little bit more. They get a little wear and tear when they go out.
Do you just like put it in your car and drive it over there?
Yeah,
How does
no.
this work? Yeah.
So exhibitions are really another of my favorite things. That people, they go to it, they call me after they've been on a trip and go, I just saw this fabulous exhibition in New York or wherever, you know. You need to call them and get that show to come here. Like, okay,
Get
so
right on
I mean, sometimes it happens, but so loan exhibitions are very complicated. You hire, either one of your own curators, you hire a guest curator for Art After Stonewall, we had a guest curator that was really brilliant. But a lot of the exhibitions then are curated by our own curatorial team, organized. You have an idea for the exhibition, right? It's this idea that you want to show the world and talk about the world. And then you have a ideal checklist. Everything you think is perfect for this exhibition, and you track down. It's easy to find them if they're in museums. Harder to find them if they're in private collections. But you track everything down. You have this. The checklist is the ideal show. No one ever. Okay, maybe the guy at MoMA or the Met, but very few of us ever experience the ideal checklist because there'll be reasons you can't borrow it. It can't go out on loan. It's been borrowed by someone else. And then you go through this long dance of you write loan letters, you call people, you keep talking. It's a dance. We're not really very nice to each other in this regard. It's a lot of horse trading, a lot of, it's like playing poker with your cards under the table. Like, what do you have? I have this. I need that. It's a lot of that. No one calls up and says, hey, I hear you're having that. I would just love to have you borrow my picture. Unless it's a bad picture, and then you get that call. It's the picture you don't want that they call you like, really, don't you want it? It's like, no, really, I really don't. But mostly it's a really, and there's a reason it's hard. I mean, you want to support exhibitions that are really of quality. You want to make sure that you're protecting. Objects in museums are meant to be protected for generations. I mean, I was born in 1953. I was born between the year it was painted and the year it was purchased. The museum has been taking care of that picture my entire lifetime, and it needs to take care of it for generations to come. So I think that's the other thing, is that it's the care of objects.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to get both of your opinions on this. I want to talk about how we are experiencing art now. So Nannette mounted an incredible Van Gogh exhibit, which hopefully many of you went to. It was critically acclaimed. At the exact same time, there was a private sector company mounting a virtual Van Gogh exhibit basically in an old furniture store up on Polaris Parkway, and charging for it. It was a great immersive kind of experience.
They're doing Monet now.
They're doing Monet now. They did Basquiat, I think, over at the power plant.
I missed that.
Yeah.
The Basquiat.
Yeah. So is this like what the new thing is? And we're obviously, you are in a competitive space where there's limited dollars for entertainment, sports, art, culture, performance. all that stuff? Or do you see this as just a fleeting thing? And why don't you go first,
All
Bryan?
right.
Bryan, you go first.
It's really simple, but it's kind of funny. Museums spend their money on the art and not the promotion, whereas these other exhibitions, these projected things, it's all promotion and there's no art inside. What I mean by that, to clarify everything, it's one of those things where, because I did go to the Van Gogh experience, to check it out and everything. And it actually is cool. It's like, it's a vibe, I don't want to knock it, but the promotion's misleading, first off. So it's kind of like underwhelming when you finally figure out what it is. But where the museums typically fall short is because they don't have this kind of marketing dollars for billboards to be cascaded across the city and the suburbs. So it's hard to target those kind of spaces. So I actually think the museums can learn a lot from the way that marketing works, opposed to just dismissing, their crappy projected experience. I just wasn't a fan of it so I went to the Basquiat one as well. And I think there was a couple of Basquiats there, but they're like real small. And then the rest of it was a very controlled experience, a lot of prints. And no offense to anybody who was involved in any of these things. I'm just speaking personally, that's all. So I think actually there's a lot that museums can learn from that style of marketing actually. But it got kind of confusing,
Oh, it did.
So
yeah.
I'm sure people were asking about the other one.
They did.
Versus,
we did definitely have that
which
problem.
that's where the problem comes in at, right? So go ahead, Nannette.
But also there was so much energy about Van Gogh in Columbus because of both things. I think actually in ways we benefited from the audience. But
Yeah, totally.
We did have a lot of
Yeah.
people showing up that thought they had tickets for the other thing, and we tried to help them navigate that. We all live on our screens, right? If I were out in that audience, probably my phone would be under the table a little bit, and I would be doing a little business as I got a little, which is a bad habit I have. But we live on our screens, and we live, then we come home and our TVs have gotten, huge. And we're used to that sort of video sort of experience. And so I think a lot of people relate to it. And I think it's an introductory way. It's a way to get to know artists, artwork that you might not know, or an artist you've heard about, but you haven't seen very many of the works. So I'm not opposed. And there's a few museums who are exploring the idea of building those sorts of spaces in their museum, so they would have both experiences.
Yeah, I actually think that would be a really good
That's an
idea.
interesting-
Yeah, because it's kind of like like a connector kind of space. You could use it for that kind of immersion. So I don't think the technology is bad.
Right. But
Even-
it is a for-profit thing, Bryan.
Yeah.
You're totally right. I think the thing that I would ask all of you is not to, if you're an either or, I vote for you to support your nonprofit community, culture community. But for many of us, we can afford both, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I do. Tom said I could say anything because I'm leaving.
Right.
I'm.
Okay, let's move to that.
No, am I
Wait, let
allowed?
me say one thing real quick. We're getting close to
Okay, so
taking
I-
questions from the audience
Okay,
and from the live stream. So
Okay.
if you have a question, get in line, and we'll come back to that in about 3 minutes here. So
No, I was just.
what do you
gonna-
want to say?
No, I was
Yeah.
going to say
Throw it down,
that,
man.
The nonprofit art business is a nonsensical business from a financial standpoint. If you're a business person in this audience, you're like, oh, there must be, it really must make sense. It doesn't make sense. No, it doesn't. It is not, it is a business, and we have to make lots of decisions in a business context. But if you were going to make a living at this, you would never choose this. You would never in a million years. Because it doesn't produce enough, it's a nonprofit business. But I would encourage you, and this is the thing I think people don't realize about any of the cultural organizations, and is that we only exist to serve our community. And we only exist because all of you care. Generations of people care. And it's our time to take care of these organizations. And I want you to have input. I mean, you shouldn't just say, well, I guess I have to support anything they do. If you have ideas, you want to get involved in some way. But at least be members, at least to come to things. Because without your support, we won't have those things. They do take a lot of care and feeding. And I think about objects in the collection where we've taken care of them, someone else took care of them, and this was my time, and now someone else needs to take care of them. And human beings are very pragmatic. We only take care of things we care about, that mean something to us. We don't take care of stuff that have meaning. So one of the reasons that museums and all of the cultural organizations are, need to have experiences that look like all of our lived experiences is because you're not going to care about it otherwise. You're not going to find meaning there. But finding meaning in the arts, the thing that happened all across the country after 9/11 was that attendance in cultural places, particularly in museums, went way up. Outside in New York it did, because all my New York colleagues were like, oh God, there's no one here. Well, it's because a lot of tourism is based in culture in New York. And no one was going to New York at that time, but the rest of us saw huge increases because people found that connection and that meaning in their our local artist community. And I really encourage you. And the younger ones among you, I can find a few of you here that are younger. This is not a generational thing. This has got to be you too. These are your museums, your cultural organizations, your symphony, your jazz arts, your COSI, your Franklin Park. Those are yours now. And if you want them to evolve, that's great, but you've got to be there. That was my little speech.
That was great. Yeah. So we're going to go to questions, and I'll throw it out to Mantra. Thank you.
Okay, so I am asking questions from our live stream. So our first question is from Kathy Fox. What is the top thing for Nannette on her list to finish before she retires? And what do Bryan and Tom suggest including on that list?
Oh!
Bryan and I do have some business before.
Yeah, we do have some
business before.
Yeah, totally. Tom, do you haven't answered any?
Well, she has to go first.
Okay.
The top thing. I have some collections things I need. Actually, I do. We have a committee on collections. Everything that comes to the museum, either gift or purchase, has to go through a committee process. And I have a few things teeing up for that. So that's something that's really on my list. I don't have to go to finance committee this afternoon. That's an exciting thing. So there's good. But I think it has to do with finishing up some collections work.
I would say what I would suggest, because you're seeing a lot of companies getting new CEOs, new CFOs, and they're literally doing 180s on the company. They're firing everybody and bringing in their own staff. I think that's extremely cold, and I hate when companies do that. And I've been a victim of that plenty of times. So what I would suggest to Nannette would be to make sure that the people that are valued and that you helped along the way, make sure that they have that protection going forward, so that they can do the best that they're doing to continue the legacy. So yeah.
That's nice. I mean, because there's a lot of great staff members here today. We have a great museum staff. It is you do it all. As Tom will tell you, at GCAC, it's a together thing. If you don't have a great team, it doesn't.
Yeah, it won't work. Exactly. So yeah, it's just putting the people in the right position and making sure that goes as far as it can.
That's good.
Next question.
Mindy Wright, a member of the program committee, and I hope I'm not going to be putting you on the spot, Nannette. When I used to teach at Ohio State, I taught a nonprofit class, and Nannette very kindly would come and talk to my students. And they didn't get that whole thing about nonprofit. And you have a great story that I quote you on all the time, the widget story.
Oh, the widget story.
And I wonder if you would share that with everybody, because I think it encapsulates the idea of a nonprofit so easily and so clearly for people who don't get that.
Oh, this story goes back to the beginning of my directorship. And Jeff Edwards was my board chair. And we had someone on the trustee that was a very brilliant business person, but they were very entrepreneurial. They were brilliant. But I couldn't get them to understand, and I kept trying, and I was trying to like, what can I do? And Jeff is like, oh, no, he's been around too long. Just let it go. He's a nice man, but, he's not going to get it. And I said, I don't know what. So he says, well, let me tell you this story. He was on the phone. He's actually forgotten this. And I tell it, and he goes, I forgot when we did this. And I go. So he said to me, so you're a businessman. And I said, business guy. And I said, okay. And you make widgets. I said, okay. You make green widgets and red widgets. I said, okay. I said, what is this about? He goes, you make green widgets and red widgets. I said, okay, I got it. And he says, the green widgets sell like mad. You can't make enough of them, right? And I said, okay. And the red widgets, you're lucky to sell too. And I said, okay. And he said, what do you do as a business person? I said, is this a trick question? He said, no, it's not a trick question. What is it? I said, you make more green widgets and you stop making red widgets? And he said, exactly. And he said, so here's the thing. So a business person, when you first come on a board at a nonprofit, you say, you're there, you're listening, you're thinking, oh, God, they just give it to me and I will fix it. I'm a business person. I know how to fix it. Just give it to me. And he said, some people never move beyond that. And he said, but if you stay in a nonprofit board or volunteer group, he said, your thinking evolves. And he said, and one day you think, oh, God, the red widget is the mission. He said, the green widget is all the stuff you do, but the red widget is the mission. You can't throw the mission out. You have to keep the red widget. And he said, and then over time, you begin to love the red widget, and you will sacrifice for the red widget, and it's all about the red widget. And the green widget is just a way to keep the red widget alive. And he would go on about this, and he said, and then you begin to realize, at first when you're there, you think, why are these people doing this? I mean, they're not making a decent living. And he said, and then you evolve to believing how much you love the museum staff, in this case we're talking about the museum, because they do sacrifice and they're there and they're willing to build a life around a cultural organization, a nonprofit organization that serves its community and protects the red widget. That's the widget stuff.
Okay, our next question is online. It's from Maggie Birrell-Shack from Mosaic. How can high school students get involved in the museum and advocate for the arts?
I got this one.
You got it.
Just come see Bryan Moss. I'll take care of you. No. So there are a lot of ways to get access. A lot of times, and the museum has made it great to buffer that, meaning like putting things that pull people in, that looks like them, that looks familiar. So honestly, you can just go cold, into a museum and then just ask for the learning department and they will send you right over. So that's the direct way to do it. There also is a very strong community based around the museum, and those are different locations. Some of the people are here. Scott has Streetlight Guild. You can get access through him to the museum. We have different programs just through Parks and Recs even. And then there's a lot of volunteering. Whenever you can find a space to volunteer at the museum or through any arts, that's a direct pathway to the museum because it all goes back to that space. So yeah, it's a very simple approach. A lot of it's just taking that initiative to go out and actually do it. You can also just look at pictures online on Instagram, let's say the hashtag, and if there's somebody that looks cool, like that they look like they're at the museum having fun, just hit them up and ask them, like, oh, how did you get involved? Anything like that, it's actually very straightforward, and it's always welcoming. So yeah, it's a very easy process. Nannette, do you want to add on to that?
Well, I think we're getting, COVID sort of, we have a great evening program for high school students and things. I think it's been on hiatus and we're thinking about bringing it back. I mean, it sort of was a victim of COVID, so.
Yeah, but yeah, the connection's just through the people. Yeah. The community can lead you there. It's super easy.
I'm John Lowe. So what makes art art?
Oh, the question.
I was hoping to hear a little more about that.
You sat with it the whole time and we never did the title. I know, John, that's really a problem.
What's the question?
What makes art art? What makes art art? That was the title.
We avoided it
Talk.
until now, yes.
Art. I don't know. This is the hardest question. Like, I could tell you, if you asked me how to make $10,000 a day, I could tell you in 2 seconds how to do it. But what makes art art is really hard. I would say, because I talk about this all the time, actually. And I talk about what I do, because people ask me, like, how do you have the ability to connect your art to people? People like buying your art, blah, blah, blah. Really what it is, artists a lot of times like to do the opposite. Like, they're apprehensive, they like to keep the art under the bed, those kind of things. They don't like to, like, create. What separated me was that I actually, like, was curious about what the public liked. And then I synthesized that through my aesthetic and my process. And so I think that's what the idea is. You're connecting to people and a relationship through an aesthetic. It's actually really hard to do. It's the hardest thing to do because it's so subjective. But yeah, if you can develop a connection to a person or a group, and then you can connect that idea to a visual representation, I think that's what makes art art. Because when I was making it and it was under my bed, I was very depressed, very bored. But now being here, I feel good, feel confident. I like what I do now, those kind of things. So yeah, Nannette.
Right, I think you're right. Art is the aesthetic impulse the human beings have. We all have it. Now you may make bad art, but that aesthetic, that impulse to make, the aesthetic impulse to create something out of nothing, that has meaning because it's an aesthetic experience, whether it's a music or dance or art or visual arts. And I think it's a communication thing, which is why when you hide it under your bed, it's not the same, because it's a form of communication. Human beings figured out how to find shelter, get food, make more human beings, and then we started making art. I mean, art goes back to we keep trying to figure out where art starts. It's right at the beginning. We've got evidence, in fact, that the Neanderthals, which were inhabited the planet for a while, very early, the beginning. It's just, I suspect the very, very beginning.
When I got this job, somebody gave me the book Art for Dummies.
Oh, yeah.
That's what I knew about art at the time.
I forgot you weren't an art person.
I was not an art person.
I knew you were
much
before you
more
were an
of a
art person.
political animal.
You were.
Wow.
I used to learn.
Yeah, yes. My favorite artist is Keith Haring. Nannette has never mounted an exhibit for me of his work.
No, but I
Yes.
know a collector who is thinking about giving their Keith Harings to the museum.
You're kidding.
Yes, I do. That's
Okay.
true.
All right. Well, some of you know I have a Keith Haring tattoo, so yes,
God,
I
did I
do.
know that?
Yeah, you knew that.
Is it in a part of your
I'll
body
show
that
it
you
to
can
you.
tell us about?
I'll show it to you.
Okay.
later.
It must be in a
Before
part of your
Tom
body we can look
retires.
at it. That was the big reveal. That's what this entire, it was about finding out about Tom's
Right.
Keith Haring tattoo.
So you might have tattoos also.
I do. I have one from
I know,
I have
'cause
one
you've
from Easter
shown them
Island.
to me, yes.
From Easter Island.
We've known each other for 30 years. We have time for one more question, then I have a comment that I need to make, but go.
I'm Jeffrey Felder with Geosite. So I'm glad there was the high school question first, because hopefully this question will be easier. So we recently moved to the area. We have a 2-year-old and we have another one on the way. I went to the zoo talk. I went to the COSI talk. So I wanted to give you the opportunity to sell people like me with young families on why we should participate in the art community here. What outlets do we have? What programming do we have? Like I said, I think the high school question probably made it a little bit easier.
No.
Yeah.
We've a lot of great family programs, but we also, we used to do it was always about programming and you bringing your kids at a certain time, your family at a certain time. But we now have the Center for Creativity and the Wonder Room, which we did when we renovated the building. And having a space in the museum all the time that's for families, I think is really important. Right now we're doing the Sindak exhibition. If you have not heard, we just opened the Maurice Sindak retrospective at the museum. How many people know who Maurice Sindak is? Yeah. And if you didn't know that name, how many people know where the Wild Things are? Yes, sometimes people don't know the Sindak name. It's the guy from the World of Wild Things. So we do have great, I think that's important. And I have to tell you, if you want your kids interested in arts, bringing them when they're young makes a difference. And I must say that there's a gender component here. Mothers will tend to do this, but fathers don't. It's very impactful when fathers bring children to art museums or to COSI. It really makes a difference. And I encourage you to think about that.
Yeah, I can honestly say, just being, because I teach, and just being a male in that space, it's very impactful. Any festival works, right, which you're familiar with. I would also say you can actually create the space for your kids to have art at home. What that can look like, as a quick example, I'm working on this concept for these preschoolers. They're sensory deprivation spaces. I just have to figure out the language for it. But just boxes with furry stuff in it or LEDs. So you can even think about what you see in art and what you experience, and then take that and create that at home, makeshift it, whatever that looks like. So you can actually bring it home. A lot of people think it's a one-way relationship, so I empower you to do that, sir.
There you go.
Yeah.
So we're going to wrap it up here. Stephen's going to come up, but I want to tell you two things. Number one, our big arts award event is tomorrow evening at 5 o'clock at the Southern Theater. 4 of the people, have been pre-announced, that are in this room right now are getting awards at that event. I'm going to tell you who they are. The first one is right to my left, Nannette Maciejunes, who is getting the Michael B. Coleman Arts Partner Award, which is very prestigious, although it does not have cash.
But it's
tied
going to have cash soon,
yes,
I know.
Yes, so I
Next
apologize to
year.
that. The gentleman getting cash in the back is Sterling Carter, filmmaker extraordinaire.
Congratulations, brother.
He's won one of our Artist Elevate Awards, which she's laughing, which comes from our endowment at the Columbus Foundation. Orlai Alonso is in the back there, acclaimed pianist. He has a show at 4 p.m. on Sunday, November 13th at St. Mary's in German Village, not to be missed. And then our very own Toby Furman, the founder, inventor of the Artmobile, is winning an award from
Congratulations,
us.
Toby.
And my final comment is, Nannette and I worked on the ticket fee together. We didn't get to talk about that today.
No.
But it is going to generate $7 million this year for the arts. And she led that with me and the help of a lot of other people, including our political leaders, notably Shannon Hardin. But that was not easy to get done.
No.
And she was the leader of the Columbus Cultural Leadership Consortium at the time. So she led the group of all the large arts organizations, and it was a killer. And then we had COVID.
And then we had COVID.
So we had no money from it. But this year,
you got us that wonderful money from Franklin County supporting operational and cultural operational budget. So thank you for that.
so we'll end it on that note. Stephen?
Well, I hope that you, like me, found today's conversation inspiring and hopeful. It's clear that Columbus is well positioned in the arts scene, and it moves, it evolves, it meets us where we are because it's for all of us. We're out front leading the way as a city to create the next generation of artists so that they too can deliver the magic that many before have helped create here in the city. And our arts future is bright because of leaders like Nannette. And so Nannette, on behalf of everyone here, our great city, thank you so much for your leadership over these many years. And our arts is bright because of each of you, and it is clear that each of us need to find our meaning when it comes to the arts. So thank each of you for leading in that. And we also want to thank the Carol A. McGuire Legacy and Civic Engagement Fund and today's sponsor, AECOM. And thank to all of our online virtual seat patrons and to the Center for Human Kindness at the Columbus Foundation, and the Columbus Dispatch for supporting today's live stream. Please make plans to join us next Wednesday as the Democracy in Crisis series continues with an analysis of the election results and what they mean for our democracy. And our very special appreciation to today's speakers, Nannette Maciejunes, Bryan Moss, as well as our host, Tom Katzenmeyer. Another round of applause, please, for all of us. Well, thank you all for joining us. We look forward to seeing you next Wednesday as the Columbus Metropolitan Club hosts another community conversation. Have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you.